Yo, 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 what is up, guys? DOZ101 here with today's topic, discussing the Attitude Era. Favorite memories, good and bad. First favorite memory of the era, the Montreal Screwjob. Bret did not want to drop the belt in Canada to Shawn Michaels. Vince, Triple H, and Shawn said, screw that, we're going to do this anyway. Shawn becomes the champion, Bret got screwed, and the creation of the Mr. McMahon character took place at Survivor Series 97, and I consider that the start of the Attitude Era. I also love the Your Brother Kane is Coming storyline, the Undertaker and Kane feud. Throughout 1997, Paul Bearer kept telling the Undertaker, Kane is coming and he's going to get his revenge on you, and he's been waiting 20 years to face you. And at Bad Blood, Kane probably had the greatest debut of all time that I ever seen. Comes in, rips off the door of the Hell in the Cell, comes in, tombstones Undertaker, allowing Michaels to get the win. And Kane goes on to destroy guys like Ahmed Johnson, Mankind, Jeff Jarrett, DOA, Flash Funk, the Hardy Boys. Ironically, the Hardy Boys were the first guys on Monday Night Raw to get destroyed by Kane. Yeah, a little fun fact there. And then Kane finally got his ultimate revenge on The Undertaker by throwing him in a casket, burning it, and then The Undertaker came back a couple months later to do the exact same thing, except he burned an image of Kane in a casket. And then they had one of the best matches at WrestleMania 14 of all time. I love that feud as well. I love the stuff with Stone Cold, Steve Austin, Mike Tyson, and Vince McMahon. Probably the realest that wrestling had ever been for me. The stuff between Austin, Tyson, and Michaels was insane. That was some great stuff. Mike Tyson coming out saying that he's been a fan since the 1970s. Austin comes out and says, I could whoop your ass any day of the week. Twice on Sunday, proceeds to shove Mike Tyson. Tyson's $100 bills falls out of his pockets. And then nobody even held Tyson back while everybody tried to hold Austin back. That was great. The Austin McMahon feud, which was arguably the greatest feud of all time. Getting to see Austin do the stuff that he did every week. Stunning Vince, the Corvette with the cement incident. I was there the night that Austin pulled the gun on Vince McMahon. I was there for that Raw in the Bradley Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That was a great time. The Austin McMahon feud, pure epicness. Mankind getting over the way he did, being that deranged demonic character and then getting thrown off the Hell in the Cell by The Undertaker in Pittsburgh at King of the Ring 98. And the birth of Mr. Sacco and the stuff that he did later on in the Attitude Era, working with The Rock, winning the WWE title for the first time the night where Tony Schiavone spoiled that Mankind was going to win the title. And half the company was in the match. It was a great match, but it was insane. Love the DX versus the Nation feud. I know I'm going all out of order, but I don't care. Love DX versus the Nation. That feud was a great feud. Triple H and DX being the goofy ones, mocking the Nation of Domination. The Rock and the Godfather and D'Lo and Owen and all these other guys just weren't having it, and it was just a gang war. That was a gang mentality type of fight. The Rock and Triple H had the match at SummerSlam 98, the ladder match for the IC title. Alright, yeah, Mankind versus The Rock feud, great stuff. Austin versus The Rock, which is arguably the greatest rivalry of all time in the history of the business. I loved anytime Austin and The Rock got together in the ring. Those two just had great match after great match. I also loved the emergence of the Hardys, the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho. All those guys were great talents back in the day. And those are guys that you will never see again in the business. Guys like Jericho, Benoit, Malenko, Edge, Christian, the Dudleys, the Hardys, the New Age Outlaws, the APA, all those guys. You'll never see anything like that again. But now for the bad in the Attitude Era. Not everything was great in the Attitude Era. For every time we got to see Austin stun Vince, we got to see Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe wrestling, and they sometimes wrestled in drag. For every time we got to see The Rock say, if you smell what The Rock is cooking, we got to see Al Snow and the Big Boss Man doing something random and completely stupid. For every time the Undertaker tombstone somebody, you had Mark Henry making out with Mae Young and making out with a transvestite and then giving birth to a hand. You also had random heel turns and face turns. The wrestling quality really wasn't all that great during the Attitude Era. You had guys just going out there on pay-per-views sometimes for no reason whatsoever. Guys were just, you were kind of lost when it came to the mid-card shuffle, like the Intercontinental title, for example. It used to go from guys like Triple H, Austin, and The Rock, and then all of a sudden, random guys were winning it, like Mark Henry, D'Lo Brown, Jeff Jarrett, and the title value went down. The European title meant absolutely nothing after Shawn and Triple H had their farce. The credibility of that title died. Really, the only title that really mattered was the WWF title, and it always went around to the same people. That's a constant complaint that I hear today, is that it's the same guys on top. It was the same guys on top back then too, people. It was the same exact people. Yeah, wrestling was at its highest point. Yeah, that's the highest that they're ever going to get. But ask yourselves, this is pretty much where I'm going to transition into my fan rant. Do you really want to see the return of the Attitude Era? Do you really want to see the WWE go back to TV 14, chair shots to the head, people going through flaming tables? Basically, do you want to see another Chris Benoit incident happen in the wrestling industry? And for those out there who complain about the PG rating and everything's always the same, everything's always so generic, guess what? It was that way during the Attitude Era too. Austin versus Vince got stale. There were times Austin versus Rock got stale. There were times where Triple H was boring. There were times where I was even tired of The Undertaker and Kane and all those guys. It got old. Moral of the story is, wrestling is going to get repetitive over time. It doesn't matter what era you watched. In the 80s, it was Hogan, Savage, Andre, Jake the Snake, Mr. Perfect, all those guys. And then Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Owen Hart, Undertaker, Steve Austin, Triple H, The Rock, Mick Foley, DX, Kane. You know, wrestling has always had that cycle of having the same people on top, and people don't realize that. Today, you have John Cena, Randy Orton, Daniel Bryan, Sheamus, Triple H, all those guys to an extent, having the same matches all the time. Back then, nobody pissed and moaned when it was the same guys on top in the Attitude Era. But today, a lot of people are complaining about it. And the people think that if the WWE goes back to TV 14, wrestling will be saved. Nope. If the WWE went back to TV 14, we could very likely have another Chris Benoit incident on our hands if the Attitude Era was to come back. And people would complain about how this Attitude Era wasn't as good as the original. So, you know, if you think that the PG rating has everything to do with why wrestling sucks today, you're the problem. If you are the kind of fan that has watched since the 80s and the 90s, you're going to have to realize that at some point, wrestling moves on. It's not our time anymore. You need to look at yourself in the mirror, and you need to realize you are contributing to your own misery, and that wrestling is going to get repetitive no matter what era you watch. It's not the same. It's never going to be the same. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, wrestling will never reach the heights that it did during the Attitude Era, nor will it surpass it. It won't happen. The Attitude Era may have been financially their greatest time that they ever had, but not everything in that era was great. People are going to have to stop overhyping the Attitude Era and overrating the Attitude Era. Really go back and watch the era and ask yourself, do you want to see the return of the Attitude Era? Because I don't. I think the sooner people learn to accept it and realize that it had its day, and they try to look at the product for what it is, maybe they'll be a lot happier. And if you don't like the current product, if you cannot stand the current product at all, maybe pro wrestling just isn't meant for you anymore. I knew that pro wrestling wasn't meant for me anymore the moment that Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker had their match at WrestleMania 26. When it was Shawn Michaels' last match, I'm like, yeah, okay, this is the end of an era to me, despite the fact that Triple H and The Undertaker had matches at the following WrestleManias. I considered Shawn and Taker the end to me. That was it. But overall, people, you got to learn to accept what you see today. You can either sit here and dwell on the past and constantly say the Attitude Era needs to come back, and eventually you're going to have to realize that it won't. Or you can grow up, you can realize that the product and the business moves on. They're targeting a new generation of fans. They couldn't continue going the way they were going after the Chris Benoit incident, and try to enjoy it for what it is. And if you don't, then maybe pro wrestling's just not meant for you anymore. So, overall, guys, leave feedback. I know I just pissed a lot of people off, but it had to be said. The Attitude Era is not coming back, and people need to get over it.